So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar on navigating the GenAI model lifecycle from selection to governance. Today's webinar is organized by To The New. We are a digital technology services company founded in 2008 with the headquarters in Singapore and delivery centers around the world in Australia, India, Dubai, and US. At To The New, we were quick to pivot and bring GenAI to the core of our operating model and also offerings to our clients. Today, we are helping our clients across the industry domains to move from a GenAI idea to implementation effectively and responsibly. The purpose of today's panel discussion is to provide concrete and practitioner level insights on selecting, training, validating, deploying, and governing GenAI models. And there's a mix of enthusiasm and apprehension about LLMs today. Business and technology leaders, they're all eager to harness the benefits of LLMs, but are worried about the unknown risks and unsure where to start. Our panel of industry leaders and AI practitioners will provide you with actionable strategies to navigate selection criteria, implementation challenges, deployment roadblocks, and governance best practices, ensuring your AI initiatives are future-proof and compliant. Before we start, a few points about today's discussion. We will not be covering basics of GenAI using industry cliches. Instead, our panelists will share unique insights from their firsthand experiences. We request you to post your questions in the chat window at the end of the session. We will try to respond to as many questions as we can within the remaining time. Now, starting with the introductions, my name is DK Verma. I joined To The New about 6 years ago as the business unit head of our Americas business. Prior to joining To The New, I have been in IT consulting and industry roles, primarily in the financial service industry. Now I will hand it over to Steve for introduction. Steve, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Steve Baggerly. I've been in the technology space for 30 plus years, building major e-commerce and software as a solution platforms, also mobile and social type interactions, with mostly the last 4 years being focused on building AI platforms for the future of the localization industry. Currently, I'm focused on working with various startups and their implementations of AI or their AI solutions.
Thank you, Steve. Maher?
Hello, everyone. My name is Maher Hanafi. I'm the Senior VP of Engineering at Betterworks. I lead our technology platform and very focused on the AI implementation, generative AI application deployment and implementation. So I'd love to hopefully through this webinar talk more about this experience and share some insights.
Excellent. Thank you, Maher. Cosmin?
Hello everyone, my name is Cosmin Andriescu. I'm the co-founder, president and CTO of Lumenova AI. For context, at Lumenova, we have a responsible AI platform. We help organizations with various aspects of AI governance. We manage and test various types of AI use cases, from traditional machine learning to GenAI use cases, where we identify AI risks, we define and manage controls for these risks, and we do the evaluation of these use cases on various metrics.
Thank you, Cosmin. Sushil?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Sushil, and I lead GenAI practice at To The New. We have been working with various clients across the geography in and helping them in navigating their GenAI journey. Really looking forward to have a very good conversations today with my fellow panelists and various leaders who have joined us today.
Thank you, Sushil. So before we dive into the agenda, we will do a quick poll. Anmol, please go ahead and post first poll. The screen is going to be on your, the pop-up going to be on your screen for about 15 seconds. So please respond to the question here. Great. Thanks to everyone who has responded. And the majority of respondents are saying that we are actively implementing GenAI in some parts of the organization. That's great to hear. That's the kind of audience we of course we're targeting, where we can share our industry experience with you folks. We're getting started with GenAI, but struggling to see where to start, and especially starting with the first step, like how do we go about selecting the right LLM for your use case? So our first topic is, given this plethora of available models, what's the best criteria to select the LLM? And we'll start with Steve on this topic. Steve, please share your views on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, TK. And I'm going to just take a brief step back, especially given the poll, is the question I get the most is, where do I start with AI? And I kind of have 3 points here. First, go and have fun, do some experimentation. Don't be apprehensive about AI. Embrace it. It's important. You'll be using it in the future no matter what. So find some individuals, find other teams within your organization that you can begin to work with, and share that knowledge, and have them start taking classes or getting up to speed on AI. It will eventually be a key part of your entire organization. So embrace it. My kind of third bullet point would be on this topic is, find a good technology partner, such as To The New, that can help you kind of wade through the plethora of information. And right now it's everywhere, as we all know. We get inundated every day with that. And it's key to work with somebody that can help you wade through that, get to some actually solutions that you can actualize today, even if they're minor. But those are important. Now, as far as how you actually start picking an LLM, well, the key to this is, don't forget the basics. Utilize your current methods and practices to determine what the right technology is, for your organization. Perform your proper due diligence. Sometimes that, when there's a shiny new object out there, we tend to jump in sometimes without doing our proper due diligence. Please do that. That's going to be very important. Just like if you were looking at any software as a solution type service or any cloud infrastructure, don't forget the basics. But then the key piece to it all is, what's your primary use case? What are you trying to solve for? Is this a marketing type? Hey, we need to be able to generate marketing campaigns super fast. Is this for support? Creating some sort of a chat bot to help you service your clients? Is this translations? Something I happen to know a lot about, something in that realm. Or is it for your engineering team to help you, write more code, to, perform better QA, to help your DevOps team perform at a higher level? So, it could even come down to just research. Is it business, medical, what have you? What are you trying to solve for? And then understand that complexity of that particular use case. That's going to be key, because you're most likely not just going to use one model for all of those kind of solutions. You may have 2 or 3 use cases where you need to use an LLM, and you may use different LLMs for that particular problem. So it's not one size fits all. And so it's important to understand that. Once again, as I already mentioned, this is a great time to work with your technology partner, and and have them work with some of your internal teams, since they're subject matter experts, to help wade through what could really be a good solution for you. Now, once we get into this a little bit deeper, it's what is the data sensitivity? What, depending on what you're trying to solve, right? It ultimately could be, come against whether it's internal data, external data, that being your client's data. So data sensitivity is going to be a huge topic. We'll talk more a little bit about governance later, which will be super important. But you need to, ensure that you stay within compliance, whether, according to your data use agreements, your data privacy agreements, and what have you. But, it's key to understand, what is the data sensitivity? What data are you working with for the particular solution you're trying to solve? And then talk about how we actually deploy it, right? Ultimately, what solution do I need to do? Do I need to have a self-hosted model? Do I need to use an API and connect to a vendor-hosted model? What solution will work best? And that will help me determine, hey, what LLM is really going to be what I need. Now, I will I will step out and kind of recommend that, at the very beginning, try and stick with a vendor type hosted model. Going self-hosted, it comes with a lot of challenges, and a lot of people don't quite understand those unique concepts yet. And so once again, work with a technology partner. I think that will be very helpful in determining what the best model is and how to deploy that. And that would be super strategic to your ultimate use case.
Yeah.
Sorry, TK.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Finish your thought.
The other key elements that you'll be coming across is, what requirements are you going to have from a performance standpoint? Do you need very accurate and high quality results in this particular use case? Is speed the most important? Is cost the most important? What are the most important aspects of your requirements that are going to be key to which LLM you pick? And then we jump into a much more sophisticated level, which is, is there a certain level of customization that you may need? And so this is going to be super critical. Can you just use a base LLM model? Do you need to do some fine tuning, which, takes some expertise to accomplish? Is this more of a, hey, I can use RAG or CAG type of scenario and just use a base model with that kind of approach? What's going to be my approach? Really, where am I headed with this LLM? And like I said, you're going to have different solutions for different use cases, not one size fits all. And the other big piece will come down to cost and budget, although I will tell you that's changed quite dramatically over the last 12 months. Costs have come down dramatically, and so it's really getting to the point now where, all the models are fairly around the same cost as far as, if you're using a vendor hosted model versus using something internal. So that budgeting and cost is all about the same at this point when you're looking at an LLM, but there certainly are some differences. And so you have to pay close attention to those, and you have to really apply, well, how does this use case work here? And how is that going to impact my costs? And my final comment on this is test, iterate, test, reevaluate, test. So that's going to be the key to picking the right LLM model that's ultimately going to work for you. There's a lot of aspects there. As I said, it's great to work with technology partners that really understand the space and that can help you wade through a lot of these complex issues and get through the noise so that you can actually actualize something that works for your organization.
Thank you, Steve. And your last point is very important because as we move from waterfall to agile methodology, we learn to embrace changes. Now, GenAI model implementation takes it to the next level. We should be fail fasting very, very quickly and be prepared for failure because failure rate is very high when we deploy GenAI models. I would let other panelists to chip in quickly with your additional thoughts. Please go ahead, anyone.
Yeah, Steve shared the very good points, and honestly, I think I agree with everything he said. And from a technical perspective, part of the engineering leader job and the organizations that are adopting AI and building AI application is to help support the vision of the company and help aligning the goal of achieving, AI features by really staying informed, because as we all know, the pace of innovation in AI is very fast. So we need some AI champions in the org who can help with this process of evaluating and addressing, the technical aspects, while the business in general is focused on the vision and the strategic plan. So it's a cross-department collaboration to achieve success with building AI applications.
Okay, Maher and Sushil, I know we have been dealing with this with many of our clients. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I especially liked Steve briefly touched base on people aspect, dealing with stakeholders, and Maher also spoke about AI champions and so on. And I think, in my opinion, this is an important aspect which is quite often overlooked by the clients, because GenAI, primarily they look at it as a technology, and which is the case, but selecting the right use case is equally important from success. You can't do the force fitting of use case and go with GenAI implementation, right? Probably one observation I wanted to highlight, especially having dialogues with various clients. Many a times we hear from them that there is a lot of buzzwords, a lot of trending LLM that has come into the market, And it's a natural tendency to go with that LLM. Or sometimes client is on a particular cloud, and more preference is to go with such LLM model which is more suited to that cloud. And our recommendation and guidance always has been, don't get influenced by such kind of buzzwords, what's happening. It's important, as Steve rightly said, just try out, embrace it, and keep doing experimentation. I think that is the most important in this particular phase. In my opinion, it's very simple. I mean, if you want to hire someone, you don't look for the smartest person in the world. I mean, you look for the best fit for that particular job, and it applies to LLM as well.
Very well said. Thank you, Sushil. We're going to move on to the next topic. Now that you have selected the model, now it's time to train, validate, deploy the model in your environment. We'll start with you, Maher. Please share your views on that. What are the challenges in implementing a model?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, this is a very important question in the life cycle of building AI features. So I think I will break this down into 3 different parts. The first one is, like Simon Sinek said, like start with why. Like, why are you trying to do this? Understanding that, and I think Steve covered a lot of this, but understanding that helps you understand what you will be deploying and kind of design and develop the solution you have. So by identifying the problem first, you go into solutioning very easily and straightforward. The other thing is also the feasibility, right? Sometimes we go into designing AI features that are maybe overfitting the need we have. And I think AI has been a buzzword in the last couple of years where kind of people think everything can be solved with AI. So, understanding what do you need from the AI, what other techniques can do for you is very helpful. And then once you have figured that out, you start with an MVP with a small scope or narrow scope of implementation, and you learn from these. So at Betterworks, as an example, we have a framework we developed that is the flywheel framework that helps us really start with, kind of have a loop where you start by planning for what you are building, building what you planned for, running the build, and then optimize and go back into planning. So as Steve said earlier, iteration is key to the process for successful deployment, successful implementation, is specifically on the engineering and technology side of things. Because, we should not forget that my second point is that we're deploying AI into an existing system already. You're not building, most of the companies, at least at this time, are building and implementing on top of a current system that is existing either on-prem or on cloud or a hybrid approach. So understanding your deployment strategy on a cloud infrastructure or on-prem and how would you integrate that with existing systems is key. So for that same thing, we developed, from a technology perspective this time, focus on just the technology and leaving the people and process on the side for now. We're focused on building, following another framework inspired by work at Google, which is the AI maturity framework. The idea here is like you start from a very low kind of abstract implementation, easy, because one of the challenges, as you ask about AI, is that proof of concepts are so exciting, but so also accessible and easy to implement. But taking that to production is a heavy lift. Like people in organizations, most of the time, they don't really assess that kind of lift ahead of time, and they go into really being inspired and excited about a proof of concept, but getting this into production in enterprise or in B2B or B2C, that takes time, takes effort, takes iterations. So the AI maturity frameworks help us really go from low-level implementation, easy, straightforward implementation, and add more sophistication over time on a y-axis, as an example. But also, depending on the environment of the work you're doing, you need to keep building responsible AI and address some of the challenges with the generative AI as a concept in general, like hallucination and bias, and all of these things that have been ongoing for since we adopted generative AI. So this framework helps us really go towards a more sophisticated solution and or more responsible AI over time as we get more maturity, we get more understanding. We should not forget that the technology, again, is moving really fast. There is a new model every hour. There is a new concept, a new framework, a new pattern every few days. So it's really important for technology leaders in particular to not be overwhelmed with the pace of innovation, but stay informed and stay on top of what is happening, and bring your key members and key AI champions of the company to just adopt and address some of these as they happen, and know exactly where you're going, so you're not left behind in terms of adoption of technology. One of the other challenges is also, again, I was talking about building on top of existing architecture and infrastructure. So deciding if you go on-prem, use some cloud managed services, use an off-the-shelf solution, or self-host your models, open source models, on kind of containers and on your virtual machines, is a trade-off that, again, from a technology perspective, you need to make a decision on to know exactly where you're going. And last but not least, data. I think we all talk about this. Data is the most important aspect of AI. Again, it really requires a lot of work to get your data cleaned up, processed, or pre-processed for AI. You cannot just connect AI on top of what you have unless you do that work. So it really depends on the techniques you'll be adopting for augmented retrieval and things like that, but you need to really work on your data. There is also other aspect that is more focused on privacy, security, and keeping controls. I have seen situations where adding AI to existing software leads to kind of loosen controls, and you lose some of the work you have been doing on your application to control and keep it, private and secure by just adopting AI. And we have seen in the early days of generative AI a lot of data leakage and a lot of data problems. So at the end of the day, if I want to summarize like my maybe advice to business leaders and technology leaders, obviously, is to adopt the incremental approach and continuous evaluation. Like really start small, keep growing the scope, but also evaluate and kind of look back into the implementation. Avoid over complexity, but also stay informed and follow what is happening in AI. So kind of you build your vision and your roadmap, but you don't have to adopt the most recent technologies out there because it could be overwhelming to your team. And then at the end, maintain control, prioritize privacy, security, because AI kind of has been moving really fast, but I don't think security and privacy has been catching up as fast, and you need to keep that in mind because otherwise you will be kind of breaking some of the systems you have in place.
Thank you, Maher. Just in case some of our attendees missed it, if they want to get access to this AI maturity framework, where can they get access to it?
Yeah, I have a YouTube video where I talked about this, so I'll be sharing a link. But also, if you can search Google AI Maturity Framework, you'll find it online. But maybe TK, we can coordinate on sharing some links after the webinar.
Thank you, Maher.
Sure.
Anyone else who wants to add to what Maher already covered?
I want to say that I agree with everything Maher said, and just to reinforce, neglecting governance is probably one of the biggest pitfalls here. Skipping the governance checks that need to be in place. Weak validation, not testing enough. To the earlier point that Steve made in the first question, those are critical things that we see as well.
Yeah. Sushil?
Yeah, just 2 cents. I think Maher and Cosmin added a bit, but just quick, probably on the data part, which Maher spoke about. I think trivial things such as having the model trained on actual data rather than the mock data, it does make a difference while it sounds very trivial, or how you define or how you develop your components, right? Wherein are you using the backend where completely the output parsing is happening there itself? Have it modularized. I think that's what I mean. The reason is, as Maher said, every hour there are new models coming up, and you continue to look at what's the right fit. You should have a ability to plug in, plug out, those kind of things, right? That's most important. The last one of the observation, and which is probably a good thing for everyone to know, is when we talk about GenAI implementation for a particular use case, a natural tendency is we look at leveraging LLM to the each and every function within that use case, and look at opportunity wherein you can supplement GenAI, the LLM, using the traditional NLP or machine learning as well. It helps a lot. There are scenarios because it not only helps in improving or reducing your latency, but it also helps in reducing the cost significantly. I think that's what I would say.
Yeah, great point. So don't mark up the data like we used to, traditional software development. That's not going to work in case of GenAI. And yeah, if you have invested in machine learning and NLP-based models, don't just discard them. There could still be some place for those in the new world. Thank you, Sushil, and thanks, Maher and Cosmin. We'll move on to the third topic, which is now that you've invested a lot of effort in deploying these models in your environment, how do you govern these? Now you need organizational policies to control what these models do to your business. Cosmin, we'll start with you. You and your team have built a platform for AI governance, so you'll be the best person to share views on this. Please go ahead.
Sure. So implementing governance for GenAI use cases has unique challenges, and those are due to the complexity, the scale, and the evolving nature of the technology. Based on our experience and various research that was published, there are, I would say, 5-6 different major categories of challenges. So I'll mention a few. One of the top ones are inconsistencies in the way AI risk is approached across an organization. So different departments often assess and manage AI risk differently, leading to gaps that can expose various types of vulnerabilities. There is also the aspect of what we call timely risk mitigation. These GenAI use cases evolve quickly, making it hard to address risks in real time, especially in high stakes application. It's an issue. As you know, there is an evolving regulatory landscape, especially globally. There are different compliance requirements across regions. So it's pretty much a moving target, identifying legal and various aspects here. Another key thing is the rising usage of AI across the organization that was mentioned earlier. As the adoption grows, governing these use cases, each use case might have unique risks. So governing overall becomes an increasingly complex problem. We also see, potential risks to reputation with customers. To the point that Maher mentioned earlier regarding hallucinations. If you have such a use case that is customer-facing, and let's say a chatbot or something like that, and it hallucinates, obviously there erodes trust. And there are various sectors as well. There are other type of risk in financial services, banking, insurance, where fairness is one of the critical aspects. So something to keep in mind. There is also the risk of third-party tools. External applications nowadays have embedded AI capabilities already, and they most of the time lack an alignment with internal governance controls. So they introduce other risk vectors. And to the earlier point regarding the data, enterprise or third-party data, as everyone knows by now, GenAI relies on vast amounts of data. So, there are various risks there from data privacy, security, and so on. There are some published reports mentioning that 90% of the businesses see AI as critical in their success. And there are only 10 to 50% that feel they are prepared to handle AI risks. So, this is something that it's an important aspect. There are various strategies to overcome these challenges that I mentioned. So one of them is establish a cross-functional AI governance team. That means, including data scientists, legal experts, IT, risk and compliance, and business leaders to have a holistic risk management. You want to have a clear set of AI policies and standards defined internally. You want to implement rigorous testing and validation processes to what was mentioned earlier. You want to test these AI excuses on a vast amount of metrics. look at the various aspects, pretty much the principles of responsible AI. And you want to monitor continuously these systems. This is not a one-time check. You want to regularly look for various bias, drift, hallucinations, various type of metrics, and use automation in the process.
Okay, I think you're on mute.
Sushil, thank you. Yeah, thanks for valuable insights, Cosmin. Who else wants to add to what Cosmin just said about governance?
Well, I can certainly add to it. It's a critical component to introducing AI into your organization. Now, it's not the fun stuff, and so most people don't talk about it, but it's the most important piece, and that is staying within compliance, staying within the boundaries. And that's not just for your internal data, but if you're working with external clients, their particular data, you have data use agreements, data privacy agreements that you have in place, and you need to make sure that you adhere to those. So compliance overall within your organization is super, super critical, and having transparency, with all of your organization on how you're using AI, but then outside of that with your clients as well. I think that's super critical too. So transparency is another aspect that I would add there, but compliance is so important. Cosmin said it so well, and it is just super critical, but just most people don't like to talk about it. But if you're not running that across your organization, you're going to have some issues when you implement AI, and it's not going to be good. You're going to mess up somewhere, and it's going to create a data security issue that you don't want to face. So very, very critical.
Can I add one thing here? On top of compliance and transparency, there's one thing we experienced very directly in Betterworks, which is explainability. So we really need to be able, from a product perspective, from a user experience perspective, really explain what AI did and why. So as an end user, either learn from it and also understand and build more trust in the AI solution, because that's very important. Otherwise, people will not be retained. The adoption of the solution won't be that high. So I would say compliance, transparency, and explainability are just key pillars to the success.
Yeah. No, I agree, Maher. I pretty much agree. And I think Cosmin summarized it pretty well with respect to, I think governance plays an extremely key role. The only point, TK, which I would like to make is from a governance, while you spoke about LLM, you spoke about training and development and so on. But in my opinion, governance should start from day one itself. I think that is important. And that's where Cosmin's point, how that cross-functional team, how the accountabilities laid out with each of these stakeholders, have regular policies and compliance things monitored as part of this. And as you go on in your journey, definitely the important thing is, again, continue. New models are coming up. Is my model, is there a biasness coming in? Is there a drift that is happening? Is there an explainable AI for people adoption? Or there are scenarios wherein accuracy is extremely important, and see if we need to go for LLM as a judge, that's another thing which is trending to ensure that it's accurate results which are being used or given by the solutions. I think these are the few aspects which probably are important from governance standpoint. And I pretty much concur with what fellow panelists have mentioned, TK.
Yeah, and doing it from day one means that when it comes to selecting the LLM and deploying it, you are keeping that in mind, that these are the governance challenges you're going to run into. So you go with multi-model strategy, like you said, Sushil, like have a judge model, which is evaluating performance of other models, and they can take turns. I think it's a great point. You said that right from day one, you need to learn what your governance needs are going to be with your deployments. Perfect. So we've covered all the three major stages of the GenAI lifecycle, and then great unique insights that all of you shared with our attendees. I think we're going to move to Q&A, but before that, we're going to run a quick poll. Anmol, if you could please post the second poll. For those who are waiting, please start posting your questions in the chat window. So most of the respondents are saying that they could use help with integrating GenAI into existing processes and workflows, which is expected because we all have been investing in our technologies and we can't just get rid of what's existing. So how do bring GenAI? And we touched on that topic. Sushil, you mentioned that don't discard existing NLP ML models. Here, I think you warned against when you marry the two, there could be some risks. So we touched on that topic. So I'm going to take some few questions that are coming in from the attendees. Okay, so interesting. So what's the best way to migrate from current BI-based traditional analytics to a Gen AI-based analytics? Anyone? Maher?
Yeah, I can take that question. It's an interesting one, and honestly, the answer is not black or white, right? Like the thinking should be, is it a necessity? Is it something you need to do for every BI workflow you have, or it's just for some? Because BI tools, the classical way, the pre-Gen AI are still very valid, right? Like they are strong, they are accurate, and they are useful and helpful at different layers or levels of the organization. But generative AI kind of business intelligence has been really efficient at bringing to the surface some insights that it takes a way longer time to build with the classical BI approach. So I'd say first you need to assess that and really understand if you need that or not. Do you need for everything or just for some of the most kind of interesting, more complicated BI flows you have in place? And then when you decide to pursue that, I think the challenge would be to similar to, again, building generative AI features on top of existing systems and cloud solution is really to find that kind of good abstraction layer, that layering of the implementation in hybrid approach, because you will have your other tools and you'll add generative AI to it. So, and again, because generative AI is a moving, fast growing and evolving technology, you need to have a good abstraction so you can plug and play new models. You can plug and play maybe better models as they are coming. Fun story here. I think historically we have been adopting some open source models, and by the time you design, you plan, you execute, you run one model, the next iteration of that same model comes out. So you're like questioning, do I need to kind of keep this because I tested, evaluated, and it's all good, or I need to go to the new one because it's faster and better? So really understanding the challenges adopting Gen AI in this, especially in BI, I think is very important. And then I think Gen AI creates a very high level, maybe addresses different persona. So sometimes you can have more people who are less technical, more different from business analysts and your regular, technical PMs to go into BI just by using natural language. They can really just chat with the data and get some BI information that is very important to the business. So I think, again, to go back to the question, I think first you need to think about the design. Do you need it or not? Second, if you do, you need to work on your data pipelines. You need to build on this hybrid approach, and then really understand your persona. Why you're building this or to whom you're building this is very important.
Thank you, Maher. Yeah. Anyone else?
No, I think I agree to what Maher said. I think every BI use case, BI analytics doesn't necessarily need to be moved to GenAI. I think that's most important because it all depends on personas, as Maher rightly mentioned. Because if you have a normal use case wherein just you want a dashboard static, doesn't have any reasoning or summarization, those kind of things, no need to go with GenAI and LLM. But if you want results to be there on BI analytics or for a dashboard, and highlight what caused, for example, sales dip, and what are the corrective actions that you should take to improvise, again, grow your sales. If you need such kind of smartness, such kind of dashboards, definitely GenAI is the way forward on that.
Thank
And
you,
I
Maher.
just want to add one thing to that, which is what Maher said earlier. The data is still going to be super critical in how clean that data is. Garbage in, garbage out. So, you need to spend the time up front to make sure that you're utilizing the right techniques to make sure you have very clean data. That's going to be a critical cornerstone for any solution that you pick.
Yeah. In fact, I just picked a very interesting question, Steve, maybe for you. Like, how do you go about estimating implementation cost for Gen AI? Given it's so open-ended, so unknown, how do you plan any budget for it? So I like the question. If you have any thoughts on it.
Yeah, that is very open-ended, and there's not one simple, easy solution to or factor that you can figure out to determine the overall cost. But there are things that you need to look at as far as how you're going to approach this. Depending on your particular use case, what is it you're going to be, putting in the context window ultimately of your AI solution, and that will kind of help you understand what general costs are. Now, there's the vendor approach versus the self-hosted approach. So you have different costs in those particular models. So there's a lot there that you're going to have to look at. And that's two distinctions right there. So if you're going to self-host, what's that cost? If you're going to use a vendor approach, what's that cost? Then ultimately understand the size of what you're doing in that particular use case and how much of a use you're going to put. Like I said, the context window, how many tokens do you need to spend to ultimately come up with that particular solution? That's going to be super critical. Now, there's other factors in there, and we've hit on all of those. Governance, for instance, right? That cost, what's that going to take? Once again, versus using a vendor API type approach versus on-prem or self-hosted approach, things of that nature. So there's a lot of cost factors. It's not easy to figure out. However, one of my big things is, what's your return on investment, period. If you don't understand what your return on investment or that potential on your return on investment is, and this is, what I've experienced a lot with, especially within the localization industry, ultimately you're going to gain a huge return on your investment as far as what your current expenses are. But yes, there is some upfront costs. You're going to have to spend some time testing and evaluating to determine what those are. And then depending on the certain models, once you test, then that will help you understand, well, now I understand what the rest of the costs are. But it's certainly not an easy one just to come out of the gate. It's, once again, back to the basics of understanding your use case, going out and doing some testing to understand, hey, this is what it's going to take.
Yeah.
Okay,
In the interest of time, sorry, Sushil. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
If you may allow me, the reason I was just tempted to answer this question, because this is a question which is quite often posed to me whenever I'm in dialogues with client every time. And it's obvious, and it's a fair question to understand what's the cost. And I think Steve summarized it well. I make it in a way that it's a function of 3 M's. First being model, which model you choose, which Steve elaborated. Second is manpower. It's again the technical cost. Third one is machine, which talks about infrastructure, which talks about evaluation tools, the tools for the monitoring, and so on. Right? Again, it's not easy to. It depends on the use case, what the data, which LLM model and use. I think the best way, what I recommend in such kind of scenario, and that's the way forward, is to go with the POC phase. It's typically 4 to 6 weeks kind of duration, which takes you in terms of understanding use case, looking at which is the right model there, and finally at the end of this POC phase, coming up with the recommendation on which is the right LLM in the context of your use case, what it takes from a selection of tools, the timelines, and the likely cost, looking at the data volumes and so on, right? That's definitely the approach, and which gives a clarity. That's a period which gives, okay, what's going to be the cost, and marry it with return on investment, the point which Steve made, for organization to take a call.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Sushil. Now, there are a lot of interesting questions coming up in the chat window. In the interest of time, I'm going to just take this last one, and if anyone could please respond to it in 30 seconds. In hosted solutions, where we are using a platform to host AI or agent solution, how much does the panel trust the platform's assurance of data protection and isolation from other models? After all, we are stewards of our clients' proprietary rule sets and models. So, Maher, Steve, anyone?
I can start very quickly because we self-host open source models for Betterworks, and this is a strategic decision because of the nature of the space we're in, the HR tech space, how sensitive is the data, how heavy compliance is the space. So it's very important for us to have the models running in our cloud infrastructure next to our data warehouse, so it doesn't go a round trip to a third-party vendor. And third-party vendors are fine, off-the-shelf solution through an API are fine. And we have enterprise contracts with them, so they don't do training and they don't do retention. But still, from a trust perspective, from a privacy perspective, from a holistic view to privacy and security, it's better to have things running in your system. So our customers trust this solution more, and we have higher opt-in rates with doing that. The other thing is more about, if you implement this in your own cloud, you should have expertise, right? Like that's a difference between just calling an API versus self-hosting, a model. So you need to understand LLM ops and machine learning ops. So you need to really have a stronger infrastructure. And that's a cost to take into consideration as well as you do the analysis.
Thank you, Maher. There are so many interesting questions. I feel like we should have part 2 of this panel just to discuss these questions, but sadly we have to, all good things come to an end. So does this panel discussion. Thanks to the esteemed panelists for taking time out of their busy schedules. Also, thanks to the attendees. Hopefully you take something valuable back from today's discussion. We'll be following up with you and also sharing recording of this session. Please use that email thread to communicate with us. You must have noticed that we refrain from mentioning any tools that can help in managing life cycles of GenAI models. There are many existing tools and new ones are emerging at an unprecedented speed. So please reach out if you would like to get recommendation on tools in any of the model lifecycle steps. Also, apologies again for not being able to answer all the questions. We will surely be responding to all these questions via email to you. With that, thanks again and enjoy your rest of the day or evening. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.